Hello and welcome to this Study With Me video where I will be sharing the approach that I took to prepare for a master's degree in machine learning with a few tips and tricks along the way. So I like to wake up at a reasonable time in the morning. Obviously that depends a bit on what time I was able to go to bed the previous nights. One thing that I've been doing for a long time that I find particularly useful is that I put my shoes and sport clothes out ready for me, put them on as soon as I wake up and then go outside for a walk. Now the reason I find this very helpful is because I find that psychologically the effort required to get out of bed and get into the shower and start my day is slightly more than the amount of effort required to just get up, put my shoes on and go outside. And then once I've gone outside and kind of walked around, that then builds up enough momentum so that when I come back home, I can go straight into the shower and go about my day. And I appreciate that this may sound strange, but it's worked very well for me in the past, particularly on those days where I just really don't feel like getting out of bed and doing work. If I have this habit of going outside, then it helps me to minimize my chances of lying around in bed and not starting my day. So after taking a walk for about 5 or 10 minutes, I'll come home and do the usual things. So I'll hop in the shower, then meditate for about 20 minutes, and then I prepare breakfast. And here you can see my commitment to making this video as I demonstrate a one-handed milk opening technique. So then I get started with the actual studying, and because I've already decided exactly what I'm going to cover ahead of the session, I can jump straight in. I may make a video in future about how I decide exactly what I'm going to cover, but I always like to do that in advance because I know exactly what I'm starting on. It saves that period that can be quite inefficient where you're trying to decide what you want to study. And I tend to set myself a fairly loose target. So for example, this morning I had set myself the target of completing the 3rd and 4th weeks of an online course that I was doing on mathematics for machine learning by lunchtime. But if the week 3 took longer than maybe I anticipated, then there's absolutely no problem and I can push 4 back to either after lunchtime or the next day. And in general, the approach that I take when I'm trying to learn new content, particularly if I'm doing an online video series, is that I will err on the side of going too fast and only backtrack if I need to. So I think it's quite easy to consume this kind of content fairly passively, but by doing this, I'm really forcing my brain to have to work hard in order to keep up with all the new information that's being given. So in order to do that, I've downloaded a speed controller, which I use as an extension for Google Chrome, and I tend to toggle the speed up and down depending on how confident I feel with the content in the video. So I will typically toggle from between around 1.5 times speed up to maybe 4 times speed, depending how confident I feel with that content. And what's nice about this Chrome extension is you can just use S and D on your keyboard to slow things down and speed things up. If at any point there's something that I feel I haven't quite grasped, then I'm more than happy to pause the video, try and write out maybe the source of my confusion. I will either then backtrack the video or I will just open a new tab and Google to find the answer. And one other thing that I try to prioritize whenever I'm consuming this kind of content is I will always prioritize output rather than input. So obviously when you're doing the course you consume a lot of information, but actually the real test of whether you have understood and consolidated what it is that you have read or listened to or watched is to actually do something that tests that knowledge. So whenever I'm doing these online courses, I always prioritize effort spent on answering the questions. So I finished week 3, time for lunch. So after that, I felt like taking a break from studying, so I instead spent the afternoon editing a YouTube video, which was one that I'd recorded the previous day about how we could use artificial intelligence to analyze chest x-rays. So I shared that on my channel after a few hours of editing, and I then moved on to the next task. And this is a general principle that I use when approaching my work, whether that's studying or otherwise. I always try to line up my work with what I feel like doing at that time. Because if I have at least some desire to do the task at hand, I will always work much more intensely and more efficiently. But once that intensity starts to wear off, then actually there's not much benefit from trying to squeeze out more work. So then I could just switch up to another task and work intensely in that. And I find that way over time, I'm able to maintain the motivation and be pretty productive. So I actually didn't really feel like studying for the rest of the day. So after the video editing, I worked on a grant proposal for a health technology startup that I work for. And after that, I worked on a coding exercise that I'm writing as an educational thing to help teach medical students in London, which I will also be sharing on a great website that my friend has set up called CodeMD. So actually, in the end, I didn't spend a huge amount of time in the day studying, but I did spend a solid morning. And because I maintained the motivation, I was able to finish the online course over the next couple of days and then be well prepared to start the master's degree.
So it's just after 11 o'clock. I did some work on the coding exercises, and yeah, that's it for the day. Fairly productive. Took the approach that I quite like to take, which is just taking it kind of chill. I know there's stuff that I need to do, but mostly I'm just driven by what I enjoy doing, which broadly lines up with what I need to do. And there was one task that wasn't super fun, which was the grant proposal, which I squeezed in there. That was the one that probably took the most effort, so I sandwiched that with some things that I enjoy, like editing the video and writing the programming exercise. But that's everything for today. I'm gonna head to bed now. Thanks for watching.